My name is Evan Cole. I'm a structural engineer assigned to Polar Research Station 6, 200 kilometers from anything that counts as civilization. Out here, I keep roofs from collapsing, doors from freezing shut, and morale from doing both. We measure ice cores, barometric pressure, wind shear routine, measurable, safe. At least it used to be. 2 weeks ago, the drilling team punched through layer 17 and the bit didn't hit ice. It rang, like tapping a glass table in an empty church. Since then, the storm has locked us in. No flights. No rescue. 12 days of white noise and thinner patience. The others say it's just wind in the vents, a trick of pressure. But the wind doesn't shape syllables. Last night, while the lights stuttered 3 times like they always do it, came through the duct above my bunk. A breath, then a whisper, close enough to frost the air. It said my name. We live in narrow, white metal modules that groan when the wind finds the right angle. The station looks like a row of shipping containers. Someone tried to teach manners numbered doors, porthole windows, safety placards that nobody reads after the first week. Inside, the heaters wheeze like old dogs. The air tastes like copper and freezer burn, and the coffee is instant because anything else freezes on the walk back from storage. There were 6 of us when the supply plane left. Now there are 5. Dr. Marla Finch, climatologist, is the kind of person who hums old jazz while graphing ice core data. She clips her pencils to a lanyard like a teacher and keeps a lucky silver coin taped inside her notebook. When she laughs, it's short like a hiccup she trained into a smile. She's our North Star on numbers, and the only one who can make a storm briefing feel like a bedtime story. Brody, our mechanic, talks too loud and laughs too hard, because silence eats him. A Montana boy with forearms like timber and a habit of calling every machine she, he cleans the generator with the same tenderness you'd save for a wedding dress. He played linebacker in high school and keeps a football signed by a cousin who almost made the league. He also sleeps with earplugs, not for the wind, but for whatever he won't admit he hears between 2 and 4 a.m. Sasha handles comms. She worked the Alaska oil fields, where radios don't ask for small talk and men don't either. She wears a paracord bracelet she ties and unties whenever the sky noise spikes. Sasha has that still water look, quiet, steady, but you know it's deep. When the aurora shows on clear nights, she steps outside and watches without a word, as if the lights are a code she almost remembers. Nguyen is our biologist, the calm one, the watcher. He sketches notes in a tight hand and can name a microbe like he's introducing a friend. He brews tea that smells like orange peel and spruce tips, a small smell of home that cuts through the diesel and bleach. If you tell a joke, Nguyen will smile before you reach the punchline, as if he's already found a kinder version of it. If something is wrong, he will notice first and say it last. And me, Evan Cole, just trying to keep the place standing. I was raised on job sites and small-town fix-it shops, a dad who measured twice and cursed once. I came here for the quiet work load paths, thermal expansion, metal fatigue. I stayed because the cold makes sense. It is honest. You respect it, or it kills you. No ego about it. Daily life is a set of rituals that keep us human. We drink instant coffee thick enough to patch drywall, play cards at the stainless table with the dent in it, argue about music like it matters. Marla says Coltrane for focus. Brody votes hair metal for morale. Sasha pretends the radio static is better than both. Nguyen says silence is a song if you listen right. We take turns cooking, and cooking means adding hot water to something that was once morally related to food. On Thursdays, if the generator load is friendly, we warm the common room 10 degrees above survival and call it movie night. The hard drive is full of American comfort baseball documentaries, road trip comedies, a Christmas movie set in July that somehow works here in a place with no July. Outside, winter is a year that forgot how to end. The sun grazes the horizon for 40 minutes and then thinks better of it. The rest is blue dark and wind. Fine snow skates across the ice like smoke trying to be solid. The station sits 200 kilometers from the nearest everything. The map calls that a research outpost. Your body calls it a rumor. When the storm warning came, Marla read the numbers without drama. Category 12, she said, tapping the barometer. 12 days minimum. No flights. We lock in. She smiled her short smile. We've done worse. We all nodded like a choir. That's part of the ritual too. The nod that says we believe in each other, even if belief isn't what keeps metal from buckling. The first strange thing was the light. Sasha logged it on day 2. The hallway fluorescence blinked exactly 3 times on a clean 2-hour interval, 200, 400, 603 crisp pulses, then steady glow. Brody swore it was the wind pushing a loose ground. I rewired the ballast, checked the inverter, replaced the tube. The timing held. Wind can howl, hum and moan. It does not keep a schedule. Glitch, Sasha said, but the way she said it wrote the word in pencil. Day 3, the heaters fought and lost. Not entirely, just by a degree that felt personal, the kind of petty cruelty only a machine or a human can achieve. That's when the arguments started, small and stupid, television sitcom fights that didn't fit our faces. Brody accused Nguyen of hoarding T-Noon, apologized for inventorying the cinnamon twice. Marla asked us to use our inside voices, which is funny in a place where the outside voice is a scream. By day 4, we were full cabin. The wind found a key that fit every panel. The station made a language of its own: clicks, sighs, a rattle that traveled like footsteps with a limp. The snow accumulated in drifts against the modules and the airlock threshold. I checked the roof bolts twice a day, each one a silver dot on a prayer bead, and noted flexion in millimeters like baseball stats. One more ritual, numbers to prove we exist. We kept working, because work is the shape of sanity. The drilling team had broken through layer 17 before the storm, and the core samples came up unlike any Marla had seen. The ice wasn't just compressed snow, it was layered with something glassy and fine, like Frost's handwriting. Under certain light, the threads inside the core seemed to run in patterns, braided and purposeful. Marla said that was impossible, and photographed it a dozen times to be sure it was. Brody cleaned the drill rig. She didn't like what she chewed, he grumbled, holding up a tooth scored smooth. Ice doesn't bite back. Sasha tried to ping the logistics hub every morning at 10. The storm bounced signals like a drunk bouncer. Sometimes the tone would catch, sometimes it would throw us into a whirl of our own carrier wave. On the good days she'd pull down 30 seconds of delayed text. On the bad days she'd lift her headset, press it to her chest, and stare at the wall clock as if she could pull time in with her eyes. Nguyen set up a microscope in the warmest corner of the lab and took thin shavings from the core. He labeled the slides with dates and a small star for layer 17, as if marking the day a child lost a tooth. When I brought him tea, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "It's nothing I can name," he said, and smiled that preemptive smile of his, which is a kind of something. We filled the rest with American smallness arguments about chili recipes, beans or no beans. Whether the Midwest really counts as a region, if it is unpatriotic to hate pumpkin pie, whether baseball is meditation disguised as a sport. I told a story about my dad replacing a porch in August heat, how he'd say measure twice so you only get mad once. Marla said her mother collected vinyls and hid love notes inside the sleeves. Brody said he missed the sound of a drive-through speaker mangling his order. Sasha said nothing and then told us the exact shade of the sky, the day she realized the pipeline would outlive her. We laughed. It felt good. We laughed again, louder. So the station would know it didn't own us. At 200, the lights blinked 3 times. We timed it with the wall clock to prove it to ourselves. At 400, 3 blinks again. At 600, 3 blinks. I pulled the panel and found the line clean. No arcing. No moisture. Brody watched my hands like he wanted to grab the wire just to feel something true. "Say it's the wind," he said. "Say it out loud." I didn't. The vents began to talk on day 6. That's how we framed it, because framing is another ritual. The talk was nothing first long notes that rose and fell as the pressure differentials hunted a path. Then we started hearing shapes, not words, not yet. But pauses where a word could go, the way a creek almost says your name if you believe in being haunted. Airflow harmonics, Marla said, and wrote equations until her pencil squeaked. A building is an instrument. We're just hearing the song. At lunch, the radio clicked open without Sasha touching it. White hiss, then a soft scrape, like a mic rubbing denim. Sasha pulled the headset closer and lowered her voice the way people lower their voice in a church designed by bad news. PR6 to hub copy. The hiss thinned, and then the channel closed itself with a tidy pop, as if the storm were learning our etiquette. Glitch, Sasha said again. Pencil thin. Night though night is a mood more than a time here brought a brief slit of sun. For 40 minutes the horizon bled orange, and the station cast a shadow that looked taller than it had any right to be. I went up to the roof to sweep spindrift off the solar panels. From up there, the world was a plate of light, the wind carving invisible rivers through the snow. I could imagine the planet turning, the long, slow tilt that keeps promises to seasons we never see. The hatch behind me clanged. 3 slow knocks. Brody, I said, already annoyed, because the only way to show love out here is to be irritated at the right moments. Silence. Then the wind filled the space where an answer should have been. I opened the hatch. The ladder well was empty, metal ringing the way it does after footsteps that aren't there. When I went back down, the wall clock read 1600. The lights blinked 3 times at 1600. That evening, Nguyen set a cup of tea by my elbow and asked, gently, "Do you hear it clearer when you're alone?" He wasn't smiling. I realized then that he had stopped doing that. I told him yes. He nodded like I'd confirmed weather. "The pattern matters," he said. 3, 2 hours, 12 days. He tapped his notebook, then covered the page with his hand, as if embarrassed to let the math breathe our air. We took inventory for the 3rd time: diesel, food, medical, batteries, the little luxuries that are actually big ones: cocoa packets, hand warmers, spare socks. Marla organized a town hall like she was mayor of a place with streets. We set rules because rules make a map where there isn't one. No one goes outside alone. No one opens a hatch after midnight if 2 people didn't knock first. We pretend the lights are a timer and check the instruments on the 3rd blink. We label it discipline, and we do not label the fear. Before bed, I walked the hallway and laid my palm flat on the wall. The metal was cold as a promise. Somewhere beyond it, layer 17 waited in the dark, a core sealed under tarps and zip ties, a thin column of history we drilled up like a confession. The vents exhaled a long, even breath. I told myself it was just air learning a new route through a crowded house. At 200, the lights blinked 3 times. And from the duct above my bunk just once, so soft I felt it more than heard it, something matched its breath to mine. The storm came in like a freight train that forgot how to stop. By day 3 the anemometer had iced into a gray fist, and the wind was just a sound, one long, grinding vowel dragging its knuckles across the tin skin of the station. Windows crusted over on the inside. Every door hinge sang. We moved slower, speaking in the clipped shorthand of people who have to ration not just food and fuel, but words. I told myself the timing quirks were power fluctuation, but the hallway lights kept stuttering 3 tight pulses at exactly 2-hour intervals, like a heartbeat on a monitor. 20. 4 go, 6 0. Not when the heaters cycled, not when the generators handed off load, a rhythm that didn't belong to our machines. We sealed the drill head the day we broke through layer 17, then sealed it again for good measure. The core logs said -42°C at depth, the kind of cold that stops time. Except when I walked past the hatch to the bore shaft, my face shield fogged from the inside. Warm air was rising, a wet ghost breath curling up the ladder rungs. I held my glove over the gap and felt it, a thin, steady exhale, like the mouth of a sleeping animal. In the galley, Nguyen rubbed his hands over a mug of instant coffee and stared at nothing. He's the quietest of us, and somehow the loudest when he finally speaks. "There's something down there," he said without looking at me. "Not just heat. Structure. The ice isn't homogeneous. It has pattern." "Like layers?" I asked. "Like ribs," he said, and finally sipped the coffee as if to take the taste of the word back from the air. Brody tried to keep the mood up by telling stories about Houston and bad karaoke and a pickup that only turned left, but his jokes kept tripping over themselves. He laughed too hard at nothing and clapped Sasha on the shoulder when she passed, like he needed to check everyone was still warm. The mechanic is the loudest human sound in this place. Boots, belt, bracket wrenches clanging against his thigh. That night he came to my doorway at 3:19, his eyes white around the edges. "You hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" He swallowed. "Something's knocking, man." We stood together in the corridor, socks on metal, listening. The storm battered the skin of the world, and under everything came a quieter rhythm. Not mechanical, not steady. A hitching series, 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock, then a long, crawling drag, as if knuckles were learning where the joists were. It sounded wrong in the way a cough sounds wrong, coming from behind a closed door at a funeral. At 3:17, exactly when Brody's wristwatch clicked over, the sound stopped, like it heard its own name called. The next morning, Sasha logged a transmission from weather-sat we hadn't actually requested. She pinched the bridge of her nose and nodded toward her console. "Listen," she said, and hit play. It was just noise at first, carrier hiss, the breath of distance. Then a breath that wasn't distance. A soft inhale, mic close. You could hear the glottal click where the throat seals and unseals. The intake shivered the needle on her VU meter. No voice. No words. Just a presence drawing oxygen through a larynx. "No one's keyed a mic since yesterday," she said. I checked the logs, and the antenna's still iced. This came through on a dead channel. I blamed the storm because the storm was something I could fix. I recalibrated the power distribution, pulled access panels, and stared at boards with their stubbled ranks of capacitors and resistors. I wrote down numbers that stayed where they were supposed to. But even the math felt like a superstition now, like lining salt on a threshold. We tried to keep our rituals. Jazz on Marla's tiny Bluetooth speaker as she annotated temperature deltas, the old horns brassy and warm against the cold. Sasha made a deck of cards from thermal printer paper and a red Sharpie. We dealt into the slick white pile and pretended we didn't watch the hallway lights out of the corners of our eyes, waiting for them to blink in threes. We ate pasta that tasted like cardboard and frost. We argued about whether the best cheeseburger in America was in Wichita or Portland, then let the argument die because none of us were going anywhere. I checked the bore shaft again, even though with the storm we had no business unlatching anything that led deeper. Warmth rose from blackness. Just a fraction of a degree, but in a place where the world is made of freeze, that fraction felt like a city on fire. The rime around the mouth of the shaft had wept and refrozen, clear glass teardrops that refracted my headlamp into tiny fractured suns. Somewhere below, ice made a sound like a distant gate scraping open. Marla joined me at the hatch. She hummed Autumn Leaves, the tune thick with summer you could barely remember. An inversion, she offered, thoughtful. A geothermal vent, maybe. Or saline brine pockets releasing trapped heat. "Brine doesn't whisper," I said, before I could stop myself. She gave me a look people reserve for dogs who understand too many words. "You're hearing it too." I didn't answer. We both peered down into the dark as if staring harder made knowledge a flashlight. Sometime after noon the band of light the sun allows us, 40 minutes of paler gray Nguyen, asked for access to the microscopy lab. He had samples he wanted to examine, thread-thin filaments he teased from meltwater in the catch basin below layer 17. I wouldn't have granted the power draw under normal conditions, but normal had taken the last flight out. I keyed the panel. The lab lights came up. Minutes later he called me, voice steady but pitched slightly above normal, the way you talk through a cut you don't want to look at. "Evan," he said, "you should see this. Under glass, not algae, not fibers, something more regular than nature and more disobedient than a machine. The filaments braided and unbraided of their own accord, Capillary action turned into an act of will. When he adjusted the focus, the braid tightened as if the lens itself applied pressure. "Life," I said. He shrugged, and it was the most honest thing I'd seen all week. "Life adjacent," he said. "Or life's memory." We sealed the slides and sealed the seals. We made a label drawer full of warnings in black marker: "Do not open. Not this. Not now." When night fell, if you can call it that here, where time stops being a sequence and becomes a room you're trapped inside, the station settled into a deeper complaint. Metal warps microscopically with temperature swing, and I know the song of it, the long wail moans of the girders. This was different. A sound like wind whistling through a reed that somebody's tongue was on the other end of. The vents seemed to exhale on a human cadence: in, out, pause. Sometimes a hitch, the tiny cough of a throat clearing. The heaters kicked, and the sound kept its own separate time. We started writing times on a whiteboard: 2:03 blinks, 17 floor knock, 80 warm vapor increases. It felt like mapping a coastline we didn't want to land on. Brody stopped singing. He started carrying a socket driver everywhere like a talisman. He tightened bolts that didn't need tightening, then tightened them again. "It's just settling," he told me, as much a plea as a statement. "We're in a can getting shaken by God." Sasha slept in the comms chair with a wool cap pulled low and the headphones crooked over one ear. She woke with a start one shift and said, "It said my name. On channel 4. We checked the recording. There was only breath, and under it the faintest suggestion of shape in the noise floor, like a face behind frosted glass, features not yet decided." At 3:17 the following night, the knocks came again, closer together, then stopped. A new sound replaced them, the slow drag of something learning weight, finding balance. Marla stood in the corridor with us, arms wrapped around herself. She wasn't humming. "Maybe we should go back out and cap the shaft again," she said. "We already capped it," I said. "Then we should pray better caps," she replied, not smiling. "I went to maintenance alone because that's what you do when you are the person whose job is to keep structures from failing." The ladder rungs to the lower decks were slick with condensation. My breath fogged my visor. Somewhere below, a drop of water fell and fell and fell, and never seemed to hit anything. At the intermediate landing I stopped and listened. Silence is never silence in a place like this. It's a tapestry of small sounds: air moving, wires shivering, your own heart practicing the drum part from some memory of summer. I held the flashlight tight and turned my head like an animal, angling one ear toward the hatch. Behind the hatch a sound like frost cracking. Under that the faint, stick-sand string pop of joints, not regular, not random. Language before words. I backed up the ladder, the way you do when a dog you don't know is making a sound you don't understand. We held a meeting in the galley, because it is the only room that can hold 6 chairs without someone's knee wedged against a cabinet. The table was pocked where hot mugs had kissed the laminate too often. We kept gloves on. Marla laid out a 3-point plan: conserve power, centralize sleeping quarters, maintain line of sight. Nguyen wanted more samples, which made my skin crawl but also felt like the only thing that would make any of this real enough to survive. Sasha argued for strict radio discipline: no open mics, no idle signals, time-boxed checks. Brody said we needed a rule about the floor at 3:17, and then winced when he heard himself make the rule out loud, like naming it fed it. "I'll take first watch," I said, and no one argued. The first watch was just me and the wind and the soft complaint of my own spine against a metal chair. I walked the ring twice an hour. I wrote down temperatures. I tightened a latch I'd tightened earlier, because sometimes your hands need something to prove they're attached to you. At exactly 4:0, the corridor lights ticked 3 beats, then steadied. I dug a fingernail into the paint on the wall and flaked off a little crescent moon of powder to keep myself from thinking. Halfway through that watch, the vent over the galley table exhaled, and the breath had the faintest smell of iron and old sugar. Blood and freezer burn. The hair on my forearms rose under 3 layers. The lights didn't flicker then. Nothing mechanical announced it. It was a choice the air made. I tried telling myself it was just the storm, just the cold playing tricks. But the cold doesn't whisper, and the storm doesn't knock. Sasha laid the binder on the mess table like it was an animal that might still bite. Its plastic cover was fogged and cracked, the label smeared to a ghost station, 3 Ops Log 1987. Pages smelled like rust and freezer burn. Inside, someone had written in a blocky, stubborn hand with a felt-tip that bled through the paper. Not procedures, not checklists, warnings, 7 of them. Do not approach sounds calling your name. Cover all reflective surfaces after sunset. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not run. It follows motion. Never look directly into the ice. It remembers. If one of your team begins repeating phrases, isolate them. It is not them. Do not sleep near the vents. If the lights flicker in a sequence of 3, stay absolutely still. Someone wrote these like confessions, I said. Or a will, Sasha murmured. The storm punched at the siding. The lights hummed, steady for now. Marla slid a mug of instant coffee toward me and kept humming a scrap of Ella Fitzgerald like she always did when she was doing math in her head. Brody joked that we should add Rule 8, never drink Evan's coffee, and then laughed too loud, like he was trying to scare away the quiet. Nguyen didn't laugh. He kept his eyes on the binder, the way a doctor watches an EKG that's about to go wrong. The missing 6th, we hadn't said Anders' name out loud since the drill broke through layer 17. He was our geophysicist, the 6th on our roster. The hole steamed upward where it shouldn't, a warm breath rising from an ancient throat. That night, Anders went to log the thermal spike and never came back. We found his notebook on the catwalk above the drill, open to a page full of hash marks in groups of 3. The binder made those marks feel like a message we'd already ignored. Rule 1: do not approach sounds calling your name. Ambience wind moan through seams, low bass like a heartbeat under floor. Light emergency strips dim to blue. It started with Brody at 2:11. I was on structural check counting rivets like prayers. Then the radio popped alive with a hiss and his voice came through, but wrong softer, like it came from inside a coat hood. Evan, it said. Meerman, need a hand. I was halfway to the service corridor before I remembered the binder and stopped. Where are you? No reply. Only a click. Then from the corridor to my left, the same voice spoke without the radio's crackle. Evan, please. Brody was in the generator room. I knew that. My feet still tried to move. Marla stepped into the hall and put a hand on my sleeve, fingers steady. Rule 1, she said, like You'd say stay. We waited, breathing frost. The voice said my name again, tired, disappointed, then slid away through the ducting like a hand receding from glass. 10 minutes later, Brody walked up behind us with a wrench over his shoulder. What he said, see in our faces. We told him. He laughed, then didn't. His laugh made an echo that wasn't his. We taped R1 on every doorframe after that. Thick black marker, like a stop sign you could touch. Rule 2: cover all reflective surfaces after sunset. Ambience: the soft scrape of tape, cloth on metal. Light headlamps only over heads off to keep glare down. You don't realize how many mirrors a station has until you start hiding them. Windows at night become faces. Stainless panels. A kettle. A pressure gauge that had a shine like a pupil. We tore emergency blankets into dull triangles and taped them over anything that gave back more than a smudge. At 16:40, with the sky in its 40 minutes of bruised daylight, I caught Nguyen staring at the I-score rack through the pane in the lab door. The cores were milky threads of time, each slit like a spine. Don't, I said, and pulled a strip of tape across the window. He blinked out of it, then helped me cover the last steel cabinet. Sasha read from the binder again, reflections are doors. In the margin, an older note in pencil said we looked through it, looked back. First test came after sunset. The galley porthole we'd forgotten to dull turned glossy black. When we walked past, it held the hallway a heartbeat too long. Brody swore the reflection showed 6 shadows, not 5. We took the porthole down and set it face down on a stack of cardboard like it was a loaded gun. Rule 3. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not run. It follows motion. Ambience: a single set of boots on metal, irregular faint, then near. Light emergency strips pulse once every 5 seconds. I drew the short straw for the first outside check, tethered to the handrail by a carabiner that ached cold through my glove. The sky wasn't black, was the kind of purple you get at the bottom of a bruise. Snow blew sideways, turning the world into TV static. Halfway between modules B and C, I heard it boots on the walkway behind me. Not mine, the rhythm was wrong. A limp, then a correction. Limp, correction. The old instinct to run lifted in my chest like a wave. I remembered the rule and instead planted my boots. The carabiner clicked in the gale. The footsteps came close enough that the railing vibrated with their weight, and then they stopped just behind my shoulder. I didn't turn. I counted 5 breaths. 6. "I know you," it whispered, and it wasn't a voice through air. It was a pressure inside my ear, like wind trying words. "You look back." I didn't. My legs shook anyway. When I took one step, slow, deliberate, the footsteps took one too, a half beat later, trying to learn me. It followed me to the hatch and stood there on the other side while I slid it shut. The metal thumped. The seal steamed. "When I told the others," Brody said, "so it likes tag." He tried to make it a joke. Nobody laughed this time. We taped R3, no running at the airlocks, and practiced moving in slow time like divers. Rule 4. Never look directly into the ice. It remembers. Ambience: deep sub-bass, faint ringing like glass rubbed with a wet finger. Light cold white, everything too clean, breath visible. Marla said the idea of memory in ice wasn't nonsense. The cores held air from other centuries, pollen, ash. But this wasn't about molecules. This felt like recognition. At 317th E, time kept coming back like a bruise. Sasha and I went to the drill deck to check the tarp over layer 17. The hole had a skin of vapor that folded and unfolded like sleep. The floodlights made the surface glare. I kept my eyes on the gauges. Sasha said softly, "There's a figure beneath the glaze." "Don't," I said. "Don't look long." "I'm not looking long," she said, but her voice went thin. I turned away from the hatch and watched the floor seam. "Count to 5 and blink," I said. "Think of anything else. Think of Anchorage. Think of the diner with the bad pie." She exhaled. "Cherry pie so red it looked radioactive." We backed off together, eyes on our boots. Later, when we sat in the galley, she rubbed her temples. "I saw a parka," she said, "orange, with Anders patch." "He's gone," I said. She shook her head. "The ice remembered him. That's not the same thing." That night, I dreamed in white. When I woke, my eyelashes were stuck together with frost. On the inside of the window, a smear had formed, 5 vertical tracks, as if something outside had put its hand there and dragged downward to see in. We covered that window too. Rule 5. If one of your team begins repeating phrases, isolate them. It is not them. Ambience: radio hiss, human breath too, even a metronome tick in the back of the mix. Light medical bay fluorescence cyclical flicker. It was Marla. At breakfast she hummed her jazz, drummed a rhythm on the table with her spoon. She asked Nguyen about his cultures, asked Sasha for the weather plot, asked me whether the eastern strut was still flexing. Normal. Human. Home. And then she set the spoon down, looked at the far wall, and said, "Hell come back when the weather clears." No one had said he out loud. She didn't blink. A minute later, exactly, she said it again in the same tone. Then again. "Marla," I said. "Hey." She turned, smiled at me like she was still inside her skin, and asked if we had any more sugar. Then, as if a program resumed, "Hell come back when the weather clears." Nguyen stood up slowly. The binder on the table felt heavier. We moved like we had practiced gently. Brody took her elbow, guided her to the med bay. She didn't fight. She didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were too bright, like a reflection. We gave her water. Took vitals. Normal. Too normal. Every 60 seconds on the second, she said, "Hell come back when the weather clears," and then blinked as if waking and apologized for zoning out. Sasha put a piece of tape on the wall. R5 isolation. She looked sick doing it. By afternoon, Marla added a second phrase. Same cadence: "Don't look at the window." She wasn't facing the window. It was covered anyway. At 2000, The radio in the med bay turned itself on and recorded her phrase, then played it back, then layered it with itself, so we heard a chorus of Marlas telling us not to look. Nguyen pulled the plug. The radio kept whispering for 12 more seconds on battery and then died. We took turns sitting outside her door, listening to the metronome tick of her voice. The worst part wasn't the repetition. It was the moments between when she was perfectly her again and we could almost forget. "Evan," she said around midnight, lucid as a sunrise. "Promise me you won't open the door if I ask you to." She swallowed. "Because I'll ask." I promised. She nodded and hummed a bar of Misty and then said, "On the minute, hell come back when the weather clears." Rule 6: Do not sleep near the vents. Ambience duct rumble, distant breath, the click of louvers. Light low amber headlamps off, only inverter glow. We dragged cots into the mess, as far from the ductwork as we could. The vents threaded the whole station like veins, and whatever was in them had lungs. At 317 Agonalways that timeth louvers clicked open by themselves. The air wasn't warmer or colder, it was present. Brody was snoring. The snore paused, changed shape. A breath answered it, sinking, mocking. He rolled onto his back, and the breath rolled too. I put my hand over his mouth lightly. His eyes flew open. I shook my head. We lay there, 5 statues pretending sleep, while the breath at the vent matched us one by one, learning us. When it reached my cadence, it said, between inhales, very softly, "Evan." We spent the next day sealing what we could: foam, tape, towels. We slept in shifts with earplugs, even though not hearing felt worse. On my shift, I wrote on the meshal whiteboard in block letters, "R6 vents no." Then, smaller, "If it knows our sleep, it knows our dreams." Nguyen added under that, "Dreams don't open doors." I underlined it twice. Rule 7: If the lights flicker in a sequence of 3, stay absolutely still. Ambience fluorescent hum, drops a half-step, wind, peaks, then silence. Light 3 sharp pulses, then black. We didn't choose to test this one. It chose us. Sasha and I were in the corridor outside the comm room, arguing the way tired people argue about inventory, about nothing. The lights across the ceiling snapped bright and dim. 3 perfect beats. Then the power went to black, so absolute it felt wet. I could hear Sasha's breath fast. The rule pounded in my skull, stay absolutely still, so I locked every muscle like I was bracing for a wave. Something entered the hallway as the darkness grew a texture. Not footsteps. The absence of them. The air changed shape around a form my eyes couldn't find. It moved between us, paused, leaned so close I could feel the weight of its attention on my teeth. My tongue went numb, like the cold had crept into my mouth. From the comm room, the dead radio tapped to life 3 times. Not on. Tapped. Like a finger learning how buttons work. I didn't breathe again until the emergency strips crawled back to life and painted the hall in that soft submarine blue. The air took one last step and wasn't between us anymore. Sasha exhaled a laugh that sounded like a sob. "It could've touched us," she said. "It did," I said. My jaw ached where I'd clenched it. On the wall, above the fire extinguisher, condensation had written 3 vertical lines and then dried to frost. We added the last tape note at eye level, R7 still. Conflict. The rules want to be broken. Rules make you feel safe. They also make you curious. The thing under the ice understood both. Brody hated stillness. He talked into it like a man whistling past a graveyard. He started leaving little jokes on the whiteboard, tally marks under days without weird. He drew a smiley face next to 317. The face turned into 3 faces overnight, each one longer. Sasha stopped sleeping more than 20 minutes at a time. She pored over the 1987 binder until the spine cracked. "They tried to leave," she said, pointing at a final entry window 2, "Do not open, light is not outside." The next page had been torn out. The ragged edge looked bitten. Nguyen kept a ledger of what we heard and when. He circled patterns, drew lines between events like he was mapping a constellation. "Intelligence is inference," he said. "It learns our rules by watching us keep them. It will design a moment that makes us choose wrong." That moment came when the generator coughed and the heat blew cold at 112. Without heat, the pipes would crack without pipes. We'd lose drinking water without water. We'd last a day. We split Sasha to comms to nurse the batteries, me and Brody to the generator housing, Nguyen to fill kettles before the lines froze. Marla God help use in isolation, ticking minutes like a clock. Halfway to the generator, the corridor lights pulsed their triple flicker. I stopped. Brody didn't. He took 2 steps and then remembered and froze in an awkward lean. The dark pressed close. From down the corridor, something measured him like a tailor. I could hear it move only when my own breath misted in front of my face. Brody, I whispered without sound, a shape of lips. Don't. The lights came back. Brody exhaled and laughed, small and wild. We good, he said. 3 faint taps answered from inside the wall. We reached the generator. The starter relay had iced and fused. I took the panel off with my gloves in my teeth, hands burning with the kind of cold that feels hot. Brody held the flashlight. Behind us, past the threshold, a voice said, just like mine, hold the light steady. Brody adjusted his hand without thinking toward the voice. The beam moved off the relay and into the darkness. Something caught it, reflected it back in a shape like an eye. Don't, I said too late. Brody flinched. The flashlight clattered, rolled, stopped with its beam pointing at the vent grill. From inside the vent, breath answered, sinking to Brody's panicked panting. I kept my hand still on the relay, R3. No running, I said. R7. Still. We stood like statues while the beam quivered. The breath matched us, slowed with us, learned us. After a count of 60, it retreated an inch. Another 60. Another inch. When the light stabilized, the breath was gone. We swapped the relay. The heat staggered back to life. Back in the mess, we found the medbay door ajar. A strip of frost ran along the floor like a drawn line. Marla, I said. From the bed, her voice, don't look at the window. We didn't. We closed the door and sealed it. On the outside, we wrote in black marker, a new confession none of us said out loud. The rules are not for the monster. They are for us. I don't know if the thing under the ice wrote the original 7 lines. I don't know if Station 3 made them to describe what killed them, or to make sense of their own unraveling. What I know is that rules are a conversation, and something under the ice had started to talk back, sentence by sentence, minute by minute, 317 by 317, learning our names the way you learn a song. And then, sometime near dawn, all the lights in the station went out at Encino flicker, no warning, and in the perfect dark, from the corridor outside the mess, a voice exactly like mine said, gentle, reasonable, American as a diner booth at midnight, Evan. You can break a rule, just one. Sasha's hand found my sleeve. Nguyen's breath held. Brody whispered a prayer. He said he didn't know anymore. I didn't answer. I counted to 60, and then 60 again, and let the dark count with me. The storm raged like a city of knives against the siding. The ice remembered. The vents breathed. The footsteps waited for motion that wouldn't come. Somewhere, down through layer 17, warm vapor rose from a throat older than maps. The rules hung in the air like frost you could read by touch. We kept them, for an hour longer. For another night. For another 317. Not because we were brave. Because we were still here. Because the thing under the ice was, too. The first voice came at 112, thin as fishing line pulled across a metal edge. Brody, it called, a woman's breath on a winter window. Honey, you awake? We were in the galley finishing a pot of coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. Sasha's eyes cut to the hallway. Marla froze with her mug halfway to her mouth. Nguyen mouth don't answer. Brody answered anyway. Ma, the word left his face like steam, involuntary and childsmall. He set the mug down too hard. The sound ricocheted down the corridor, into the storage deck where the wind never reached. Brody, I said low. Rule 1. He nodded like head heard me, but his feet were already moving. The station creaked under a gust. Far off, a panel clapped. From the ceiling, frost dust sifted like flour. We followed at a distance. The corridor was a steel windpipe. Every step sounded like it belonged to someone else. The lights hummed. The red emergency strip along the baseboards pulsed like a heartbeat. At the hatch to the storage deck, Brody hesitated. She's down there. He said it like a fact, not a hope. "Mom, here," he called. "Where are you?" Silence soaked the metal. Then 3 delicate raps from the other side of the hatch, in a rhythm no storm wind could keep. Knock. Knock. Sasha drew in a sharp breath. "Don't," she whispered. "Brody, don't open." The hatch didn't open. It exploded. A concussive whump buckled the door outward, bolts screaming, the steel skin blooming like a kicked drum. A jet of breath, warm, impossibly warm, rushed over us, smelled faintly of wet iron and something old, like a thawed museum. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, a third time, in a perfect, patient sequence. Rule 7. Still, Sasha said. Everybody still. We froze where we stood, bodies turning to statues in the cold. Breath became the loudest thing in the world. Everyone except Brody. He stumbled backward, instinct beating rule, hands up as if to ward off a memory. The movement was small. It was enough. From the black throat of the storage deck, something stepped out. Tall in the way a shadow is tall. Too long in the limbs, like a man stretched on a rack and then taught to walk again. It shimmered not with light, but with the kind of memory ice has when it keeps the outline of what once pressed into it. Its surface didn't reflect so much as remember. It leaned toward us, and the temperature in the hall rose by a degree, the heaters sighing like relieved lungs. I didn't see teeth. I didn't see eyes. Just recognition. It knew him. It wanted him. "Brody," Marla breathed, the jazz gone from her, only wind left. "Don't move." He did. A half-step, a flinch. The thing answered not with speed, but with a certainty that made speed irrelevant. It was beside him, around him, the way fog can be beside a lighthouse and also the ocean itself. He screamed. It didn't cover his mouth. It didn't crush his ribs. The scream simply shortened, like tape being scrubbed by a thumb. His voice unspooled out of him in ribbons that had no color, no shape, only sound. The corridor filled with him, the howl head made at 9 when he fell off a bike, the barked laugh from last week, when the coffee machine finally worked, the soft "ma" head just said. It pulled the sound out of him until there was no more Brody left in the air. Sasha's hand found my sleeve. Her nails bit through the fabric. "It tracks motion," she whispered. Rule 3. I felt every muscle in my body revolt. Stillness is a choice until fear makes it a prison. A drop of water crawled down my temple. Another. Sweat in a room below freezing. The lights held steady after the third flicker. The thing, its head as if listening to a song it almost recognized. It stepped closer to Brody. The floor groaned. Nguyen didn't blink. I counted heartbeats in the pipes. Something in the vents breathed. "Ma," the word came again from the thing, this time, perfectly pitched, perfectly broken. It bounced down the hallway in Brody's mother's timing. "Honey, you awake?" It wanted him to answer again. It wanted the game to continue. Brody tried to swallow air and found none. His throat worked. His eyes cut to me, then to the gap-toothed hatch, then to the floor. He chose the floor like a man choosing pew over altar. Knees buckled. Hands lifted. His body could not decide what to do with fear. When he moved, the lights answered him. A soft, curious tick. Not the 3 something else, like a question being formed. Still, Sasha mouthed. She didn't dare say it. The thing leaned until its not face was inches from his. Ice remembers. Maybe that was all it had, a memory of faces pressed against it, of breath fogging its skin. It did not need eyes to see him, it only needed the shape of his warmth. "Take me instead," I tried to say with my stare, stupid and human. It didn't look at me, because looking wasn't how it chose its prey. Movement was. Brody's hand twitched. The corridor filled with a low, mammal sound, him again, but not a scream this time. The sound of a boy being found in a dark store by his mother, a laugh and a sob braided. The thing drank it. "Back," Nguyen whispered through teeth that hadn't moved for a full minute. "When it feeds, step back." How far? Marla's lips didn't appear to move. "As far as you can without moving," he said, and if that was a joke, it was the last one we had. The heater coughed. The lights buzzed. The emergency strip along the floor flickered, red then steady. Somewhere beyond the blown hatch, a tool clinked, fell, and rolled in a long, slow arc until it touched a wall with a patient kiss. Brody's body learned the lesson too late. Stillness. He made himself into a statue. The thing lost interest the way a cat loses interest in a toy that stops pretending to be alive. It turned, the hallway sighing around it, and faced the open dark of the storage deck. That was when my breath betrayed me. A tremor. A single, involuntary step my diaphragm took for me as it hunted for air. The head snapped toward me. I became absence. I took inventory of muscles and denied them. Heart you can pound, lungs you can burn, legs do not. The lights blinked once. It didn't count. Twice. It didn't count. 3 stay absolutely still. I didn't see teeth. I didn't see eyes. Just recognition. It knew him. It wanted him. The words weren't thoughts. They were facts, laid on a cold table. The thing decided. It let Brody keep his shape. It let me keep mine. For now. It flowed backward, impossibly smooth, through the mangled hatch, into the deck where the warm breath had come from. The heat left with it, like someone opening a door to a night that had never ended. We stood there for a long time pretending to be stone. Then the vents exhaled again. This time, the breath had a hitch in it, a little laugh, and in that laugh was Brody's father telling a joke head told at every Thanksgiving. Don't, Sasha said, to any of us who might still be listening to the past. Nobody answered. We didn't. Brody's eyes were wet. He wiped them with a backhand that shook. Somewhere deep in the station, a panel settled with a sound like distant knuckles. Behind us, far down the hall, the lights tested themselves a sonothree. The station, or the thing inside it, had learned our rules. Or we had learned theirs. We sealed the hall. We don't say Brody's name anymore. Not out loud. Not in the log. Not even in the little ways people speak when they are trying to bargain with the universe. Marla crossed his name off the duty rota with the carefulness of someone defusing a bomb. Sasha turned his mug around on the shelf so the initials faced the wall. Nguyen folded Brody's parka and slid it into a locker like we were putting winter itself away. The storm hasn't let up. Day 8 of 12. The wind claws and scrapes like it's trying to pull our station apart seam by seam. The satellite dish is a white statue under a rind of rime. The generator thumps a sick rhythm, skipping every few minutes like a heart that's thinking of stopping. We ration heat by hallway. The doors sweat frost. The air tastes metallic, like the inside of a battery. I tape foam around the vents and tell myself that's sealing something out, not trapping something in. Rations thinning. Heat failing. We trade jokes the way sailors used to trade tobacco, small and dry and gone quick. I finish the last of the instant packets and switch to a kettle of snow on the hot plate. It hisses. The sound feels too loud. Everything feels too loud when you're waiting for a whisper. Last night, I heard footsteps stop outside my door. Slow, careful, familiar. I know the weight of my team by the way the floor talks. Sasha ghostlight, Nguyen steady and even, Marla a little heel heavy from boots she want replace. These weren't theirs. These footsteps learned us. It paced once, twice, then settled exactly where the shadow of the doorframe ends when the emergency lights are on. The handle did not turn. The vent breathed out a thin ribbon of air that smelled like freezer burn and something sweet rotted a long time ago. Then I heard my own voice whisper through the vent, Evan, come see. People think terror is the scream in a bad dream. It is scent. It's the quiet math you do afterward. How far to the hatch, how long to cut power to the corridor, how loud your knees will sound if they hit metal. I counted 3 flickers in the light tone 2-3 and I did what the rule says. I kept still. I let the breath freeze in my chest. I imagined the cold taking me whole and thought about how, when I was 12, my dad and I would listen to baseball on a cracked radio in his garage with the door open to July heat. He'd hand me a warm Coke and say, stillness kiddo. Watch the pitch. That's what I did. No, watched a pitch I couldn't see. The footsteps left eventually, not down the hall, but up like something had found a ladder inside the air itself. When sound disappears that way, it leaves a dent, like a couch cushion after you stand up. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. We don't really sleep anymore. We nap in shifts like soldiers too far from home to remember what home felt like. In the morning, 38 minutes of light, a gray coin dropped behind the clouds. We did rounds together. No one goes alone now. We passed the place where the drilling team broke through layer 17. The hole is plated shut, but frost flowers have bloomed around the bolts, each petal a tiny geometry lesson. Marla stared at them too long. I touched her sleeve. She blinked hard and looked away. It remembers, she said, not to me, not to anyone. Just out. Sasha found something in the comms room, faint fingerprints in the frost on the inside of the window. 4 long streaks. A thumb none of us could match. She covered the glass with duct tape and a crosshatch, then hung a foil blanket over it. We've been covering anything that throws a reflection: thermos lids, the chrome trim around the bathroom mirror, the stainless edges of the oven door. After sunset, the station looks like a house being fumigated for its own memories. Our faces live only in each other's eyes. 9 keeps notes in a black field book, small letters, tidy lines. If it is mimicry, he said, it learns by repetition. Don't teach it. He speaks softly, like a librarian giving bad news. He won't say Brody either. None of us will. If names are keys, we're boarding up our doors. That night, the lights flickered 3 times while I was alone in the tool room, counting washers and pretending that order equals safety. 3 exact pulses. I clicked my headlamp off and became furniture. Something moved in the dark. I smelled old wood, impossible, in a metal module. I heard the careful squeak of floorboards that don't exist. Then a voice across the room said, conversational. My voice: you forgot the wrench on the lower shelf. I didn't move. The rule isn't about courage, it's about math again. Stillness reduces the variables. I could feel it waiting for me to give it an angle, a motion, anything to lock onto. The longer I stood, the more the air around me wanted to shape itself into hands. Minuta Sir hours later, the emergency generator coughed. The sound distracted it, or me, and the presence slid away toward the vent with a soft groan, like ice under a skater you can't see. We're losing little pieces of ourselves the way the station loses heat. Marla doesn't hum anymore, the silence eats it. Sasha has started talking to the radios like houseplants, not to coax life from them, but to keep them from feeling alone. Nguyen prays in Vietnamese under his breath, rhythm like a heartbeat under a blanket. I write checklists. I don't need inventory of bolt sequence to restart the heater's rules we didn't make but now belong to. It feels like if we stop making lists, we'll fade into the white. On day 9, near the galley, we found a line of wet boot prints that began in the middle of the floor and ended at the ceiling. I don't think any of us truly believed in, up until we saw the last impression flatten against paint, toes pressed where the wall meets the rafters. The prints were a size that could have been mine. Or bro, no. We don't say it. On day 10, the storm slammed the outer hatch so hard the weld screamed. I braced it with a jack and watched the needle on the pressure gauge tremble. Through the small, taped porthole, a gray light pulsed in the snow, a slow heartbeat somewhere beneath the drift. Marla said the ice is listening. No one argued. On day 11, we tried to sleep in the lab, 4 cots facing the center like wagons. Nguyen suggested we tell tourist traditions, holidays, dumb jokes, anything to smudge the edges of the quiet. Marla told us about her father dancing with her in the kitchen to Ella Fitzgerald. Sasha described drilling in Prudhoe Bay, the way the sun sits on the horizon like a coin, waiting to be flipped. I told them about Christmas lights in Ohio, the kind that make the snow glow green and red. For a little while we were people again. Then the vent breathed, and the green from my memory washed over the wall. It wasn't light. It was recollection made visible, like the station had decided to play home movies on the frost. We turned our faces down and covered the reflective lid's wet mist. The glow faded. Somewhere in the walls, something shifted closer. Day 12 is tomorrow. The forecast says the wind might fall under the threshold for a pilot to try. Might is a big word out here. It can carry 1,000 miles or drop dead 2 feet from your mouth. Tonight, I take the first watch. I sit with my back to the sealed hall and my eyes on the door. The heater ticks. The clock breathes. I think about the rules. I think about all the things we do not do anymore, and the smaller list of things we still can. I keep the lights off now. I keep still when they flicker. I keep our names folded in the dark like letters we'll never send. Footsteps stop outside again. Slow, careful. Familiar. It doesn't knock. The vent exhales a syllable shaped like frost forming on glass. Evan, my voice whispers, patient as winter. Come see. I don't move. The ice remembers. And it is waiting.